everyone, I'm Anna and this is the R5 Leather Workshop. And today we are going to be making a leather cover for a notebook. Now this one here that I'm showing you is a standard composition book that you might find. But what I'm going to show you is how you can do this with pretty much any notebook that you might have. This would even work for like a book cover or like a Bible cover as well. So let's get started. So one of the things that we are going to do today is I'm going to show you how to do it with any cover. I have this one here. It's one that's floating around. This is just a journal that I have. And this one is a standard size. But again, you do not need a standard size to do this. I'm going to give you the tools so that you can do it with any book or any journal that you might want to cover in leather. Let me show you the materials that we're going to use today. For this journal book here, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things. I've done several samples of these. With this one, you can see I have two different leathers here. And the top one is a softer leather and this is a stiffer leather for the pocket. That's not a requirement, but something that I discovered in the couple I've made is that I do prefer a stiffer one in the back. So I'm going to do that again today. So what I've chosen for the leather today is these are some bigger scraps I had around. This was actually part of a tote that I messed up. And so I'm going to use this piece. This is a piece of American bison leather. It's got a really cool pull up. It does this cool kind of texture thing. So I decided to use this piece. It fit perfectly and I do really like this leather. It's really nice and malleable. So this is going to be the front of the book or the notebook. And then for the slots, we're going to use these bits of scrap that I have of this Horween Chrome XL that I have floating around. It's a little stiffer, maybe not as stiff as that other book, but they're definitely a stiffer texture. So these are going to be the pocket portions. Now that we've talked about the leather that we're using, we need to talk about measuring out our pieces for this journal. It's really an easy process. You just have to be aware of your measurements kind of at all times. Another mistake I made in my early attempts. So here I've lined up this raw edge, which is a straight edge on the 10. So my measurements are going to be, you'll see. So what I usually do to get my first measurement is I just lay this out flat and line up edge to edge. And then I just carefully roll my book over. And that gives me my initial measurement. In this case, it's at 25.5, which actually means it's 15.5 because of where I've placed this. And then I add an inch to this section because you have to deal with, as you can see here, you have this edge that needs to be stitched. And it makes the most sense to do about an inch. I will say you probably don't need the full inch. It's probably more like 3/4 of an inch, but it's better to have some extra here and adjust once you start assembling than to misjudge your measurements at this point. So the first thing we'll do is get out our ruler, and it was at 25.5 on my thing, which is, it's 15.5. I'm gonna question myself here. Yes, so it was at 25.5 on my board, which is, it's a 15.5 inch piece. And I need to add an inch, so I'm going to lay this mat down and add an inch to where it ended. And I'm just going to cut this strip off. We're going to go ahead and cut this. I've got it all lined up. Again, I'm going to talk about how much I love these grid rulers, especially when you have a grid like when you have these grids, is that I can line up my grids and it allows me to make sure that everything's nice and straight. So we're going to cut that off. I'm going to save that for another project. So now we've got this side cut like this. The next thing you need to figure out is your height this way. So in this case, I'm going to put it down here at 0 and it ends at 9 3/4. Again, I'm going to add a full inch, which means I need to cut it the other way at 10 3/4. Again, I'll line this up. Oops, see, I almost messed up there. This actually needs to be at the bottom. Again, scrap I can use somewhere else. All right, So then we're going to go ahead and look at it again. So in theory, when I do it like this, it should match up like that. Nice and simple. All right. Now, already looking at this, I'm probably correct in that I probably really only need 3/4 of an inch, but I would much rather assemble it with a deeper edge than it be too small and I have to go back and recut. So that's the other reason why I'm giving myself an inch allowance all the way around for this notebook. So this first part is done, and we're actually going to go ahead and set it aside for the moment. And now we're going to talk about the inside section. So as you can see with this test piece, what I did is I have this big flap. Something I learned, this was the second one I did. In both that I did, I made this flap really big. And that was actually kind of a mistake because it made it very difficult to slide the cover into. So what I've decided is it's better to be about half your distance. So in the case of this one, I'm going to open it up again so you can see it. I'm going to put it on 10. Okay, and it ends over here at just about 18. Yes, I'm covering part of the binding, but that's okay. So it's going to be a 4-inch piece. So I'm going to do 4 inches this way across. We're going to do 4 inches this way, and then again the same 10 3/4 up. I'm sorry, yes, 10 3/4 up. I'm going to go the same 10 3/4 up on my board with that extra inch allowance. All right, so now this is assembled, or not assembled, but I've cut all my pieces. This is the base of our journal. So again, I'm going to kind of look at it and kind of decide, like, how do I feel about the excess at this point. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to do my little flip. There looks like there's probably way more. I probably can cut a 1/4 inch from, I'm not going to cut these pieces down at all, except maybe on the top, but I am going to cut a 1/4 inch off of just one side here and one side here, bringing it down to a 3/4 inch section. So not on both sides, not on everything. If you do that, you'll cut it down by a 1/2 inch. So we're going to cut a 1/4 inch off here so it'll fit a little better. So I'm cutting off a 1/4 inch there. Now, if you had wanted to only cut the original piece with a 3/4 inch extra from the dimensions, that's fine. I just think it's a good idea, depending on your book, to just play it safe. Okay, so now I'm going to look at this. I'm lining this up this way. Okay, and I put this one right on the edge, FYI. So it should, if I'm going to give myself about a 3/8 of an inch gap, it looks about right. Okay, so we're just going to cut a 1/4 inch off the top of each of these. Only the top on these. These are going to stay 4 inches. All right. So here comes the easy part, and we're actually almost done. So from here, we're just going to lay these down. And they're not perfect, but you can always touch up that at the end. All right, so there's what we've got going on here. Now from here, you can do a couple things. You can either TEDS tape the whole perimeter, okay, or you can glue your edges. So I'm actually going to go ahead and glue it. So we're going to flip these over and my glue. And I recently switched from using brushes to using these little art tools. I'm going to get out my wing dividers here, and I'm going to set them to 3/8 of an inch and just create a glue line. And on these, you only need to do 3 sides. Now, I'm aware you can't particularly see the lines on the camera, but they're there. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue this all the way across. So a fun little trick that I've recently been doing, especially for something like this where you need things to be somewhat exact, is I put a little extra glue on one side. I press it down, and then I'm going to let that dry, and it will stick together once the contact cement stuff is dry. So just a fun little side note, if in a few spots it didn't really stick, I can add some more. It means that I didn't put glue any farther this way into the pattern than I needed to. So there's half that. We got to glue the other side now. So it's not going to stick now because this contact cement does need to dry. All right, so we're going to let that sit, and we will come back when it's dry enough for me to stick it together. While that glue's drying, I thought we'd talk a minute about my sewing machine. I bought this machine about 3 years ago, and it is a leathercraft machine, and it has its limitations, but it also is a great way to start with sewing leather, in my opinion. I bought this one from Sailrite, but this machine has been great, and we're gonna actually use this machine. We're gonna actually use this machine when we stitch everything together here in a little bit. That being said, if you want to try to stitch this project with a standard sewing machine, it can be done with a few caveats. This machine over here is an embroidery machine that I've had probably about 15 years. It's got some problems. Also, excuse my mess back here. Anyway, but when I first started doing leathercraft, I did find that if I had thinner leathers, that I could actually use it for that. So if you're using two relatively thin leathers, you could potentially use a machine like this for this project. I would say the few things you need to think about is you don't want to have more than 2 pieces of 2 to 3 ounce leather put together. So that's pretty thin. Today's project, for example, this piece, that's one of the pocket pieces, and this piece of bison, I'm losing my scraps here, are about that. They are both about 2 to 3, and you could potentially stitch this thickness on a machine like this one over here. The other thing you're going to need to do is you need to make sure that you get a leather needle that fits this machine, because you can't use any other like needle. So make sure you get the largest leather needle that will fit your machine if you have a standard sewing machine. Lastly, find the thickest thread you can find that fits your machine. So in the case of this one here, typically I had to find upholstery thread to use for this one. It won't look, in my opinion, necessarily as clean sometimes because it's so thin, but it can be done. I would also say make sure it matches your thread. You can maybe take a risk and use a heavier duty thread. For example, the thread here that I use for my leathercraft machine, it's what's called Tex 92 is what the thickness it is. Let's see if you can see that in there. It's written in here as Tex 92. You can't use this Tex 92 thread on this machine. I think the heaviest these can take are like Tex 70 something. You'd have to go look at the different Tex grades. But basically the next one down from the Tex 92, the next thinnest one down, you can use on a machine like these. Most of these machines will accept it. So just, that's the other option, is you can kind of seek out that thread. With that being said, I did still have some rough moments with this, and I busted a handful of needles. So just those are kind of the caveats I would say if you're going to use a more standard sewing machine instead of more of an industrial style heavy duty machine like my other one over here. All right, so this is dry now. So we're going to go ahead and lay these out. In case you're wondering why these are different colors, they are technically different pieces of leather, although they look the same on this side. They were tanned a little differently, so their backs are a little different. But they look the same on the front, so I said, let's go with it. Anyway, let's go ahead and we're gonna glue these down onto this leather. All right, and now that is glued down. One thing I will say I like about this Chrome XL leather is that if I get glue on it, it just kind of rubs off. So bonus there for a chrome tan. There. Yeah, it kind of rubs off on this. I got a little bit on here. You can see this piece of leather has some scarring and stuff on it, but there we go. So it's more or less the shape it needs to be now. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to curve off all 4 of our corners and clean up some of these inconsistencies. We have a little bit of an overhang here, and we have a little bit of an overhang here. So we're going to start by cleaning up the overhang. And we're going to go ahead and curve our corners. So if you don't have a curved corner cutter like I had, you just can find something round to curve your corners. Okay. And again, if you don't have a curved corner piece, I usually cut these in sections. I kind of go around slowly with my knife to make it a little more even. I also am more likely to keep the blade up and down properly and not end up with curved angles this way. All right. So now that's all that's left to do is to stitch it all the way around. I am going to stitch it all the way around, including right here. It just gives it a nice uniform look when it's done. As you can see here, I stitched this one all the way around. You don't have to, you can just stitch here and here. I just like how it looks really nice and uniform in the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this is still set to 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to go ahead and I'm actually going to shrink it down a touch from that. But not actually a true, it's just short of 3/8, but it's not a quarter. And it's only because of the way my needle and stuff work on my machine. So if you don't have a sewing machine, you can go ahead and stitch by hand like we've always done with punching your chisels and all that. You may find that you don't want to stitch this section if you're hand stitching because it will be a little more time consuming, but again, it depends on the aesthetics that you're going for. So I'm going to go zip this over to my machine and stitch it up. All right, so this is done. You can see down here are where my strings are, where my sewing machine, and I put the joint or the start and the end as I stitched all the way around here at the bottom middle, roughly where the binding is going to fit. Here, it just seems to be the most hidden at the bottom and at this bottom end of the binding. The top would also be fine. I just feel like this somehow is the easiest. So just like if you did this by hand, I'm going to clip these. All right, so this is done. Now the other things you could do to make this just a touch more fancy is you could have added a snap if you wanted. You could have added a loop to put like a pen in here. And the reason I didn't do this for my own is largely because I know I won't use them. I'll just get annoyed with the snap. And as far as the pen part goes, it's just going to be empty half the time. So now we're going to go ahead and put our booklet in. Yeah, I can already say this one here for you guys was the first time I cut this pocket in half. Much easier to put that in, let me just say. And then you need to do this one. FYI, I've always found the second flap is much harder. I don't know why. In all the ones I've put together, it's like something happens. So I don't know why every time that second one is always a little bit wonkier and difficult to get in. The only thing maybe I would say is you can cut your seam allowance or keep that inch like we had at the original, but that's not the problem. It's fitting in there fine. It's just something about the friction and it won't go all the way through. Anyway, so there is our cover. It came out pretty good. Like I said, this piece of leather in particular has some scarring and stuff on it. And so it's unique to me and it'll work for my purposes. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy the notebook here. It's kind of nice. And if you do it with a standard size notebook inside, someone could buy a notebook and they can replace it over time and just take out the old ones and file them away. So it's kind of nice that way. It also makes a good gift if you know someone who journals a lot, but maybe you don't want to go through the process of book binding pages into the leather. You can just buy the notebook and still give them a really nice gift of a journal as well. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, leave a little note down below, comment, like, subscribe, you know, all the good stuff since I'm talking with my hands here.